Apple got caught off guard by the release of ChatGPT and GPT-4. Let's have a look at this report by New York Times to see what Apple might be doing about this, and why I think Apple might come out of this large language model arms race victorious. The New York Times report is titled How Siri, Alexa, and Google Assistant Lost the AI Race. So a lot of the report is about the Siri and Alexa, but it has some really important insights about what Apple might be doing regarding the chatbots like GPT-4. They talk about how Siri, the virtual assistant, came out in the 5th generation iPhone. And I remember this. It was the iPhone 4S, and I got it pretty much at launch when I was still in grad school. And I played with the Siri Assistant for maybe a week or two, showed it to my friends who didn't have iPhone at the time. And that was pretty much it. I own iPhones since 2009, since the 3GS, and I never used Siri on any of my iPhones. They correctly say that this was 12 years ago and say that the technology has largely remained stagnant. I don't see people really using Siri on a regular basis or Alexa. People mostly use it to just like play songs, set timers, but nothing more complicated than that. Just very simple tasks that are really easy to understand for Siri and Alexa. Here, this is an important sentence. The excitement around chatbots illustrates how Siri, Alexa, and other voice assistants that came out over a decade ago, which once elicited similar enthusiasm, have squandered their lead in the AI race. So this is interesting because you could argue that these enthusiasm about chatbots like ChatGPT, GPT-4, Llama, will fade just like it did for Siri. But I don't think that's the case because Siri was never truly useful. In the report, they highlight that Siri and probably Alexa use a very clunky code that took weeks to update with basic features. So that doesn't make it as dynamic as ChatGPT and GPT-4. Even the CEO of Microsoft says, voice assistants are dumb as a rock. And I would agree with that. It is not a super useful technology. And I think Siri can be pretty much completely scrapped at this point and replaced with GPT-like models. So then they go into how the new AI chatbots are different. AI chatbots are powered by what are known as large language models, which are systems trained to recognize and generate text based on enormous data sets scraped off the web. They can then suggest words to complete a sentence. And here they contrast how it's different from Siri and Alexa. Siri, Alexa, and Google Assistant are essentially what are known as command and control systems. These can understand the finite list of questions and requests. So if it's not coded in there, it can't do it. So the examples are, what's the weather in New York City? Turn on the bedroom lights. If a user asks the virtual assistant to do something that is not in its code, the bot simply says it can't help. And I think this is the experience of most people. You would ask Siri your question, it would say it can't help you, it would give you some useless information from search, and you just give up and you're like, whatever, I'm not going to use it because it doesn't help me, it doesn't make me faster, it just slows me down. They talked to some former engineer from Apple who worked on the Siri project, and he said this very important point. There was no path for Siri to become a creative assistant like ChatGPT because of how the code is structured. So I think the best thing right now for Apple is to keep Siri as a legacy feature, but going forward for new projects, completely scrap it and build it up from scratch. So take a voice to text engine so that you can talk, it will translate into text, and then plug it into GPT-like large language model. And this is not just Apple's problem. Amazon division working on Alexa was a major target of the company's 18,000 person layoffs. So you can see Amazon had the same problem. They made Alexa, tried to make a big splash, integrate into lots of different devices, but these devices didn't really sell. People don't really use Alexa for complex tasks. They just use it for simple things like setting a timer. And here's the most important part of the report. Many of the big tech companies are now racing to come up with responses to ChatGPT. At Apple's headquarters last month, the company held its annual AI Summit, an internal event for employees to learn about its large language model and other AI tools. Two people who were briefed on the program said, many engineers, including members of the Siri team, have been testing language generating concepts every week, the people said. So Apple is definitely working on large language models like ChatGPT and GPT-4. It's just a matter of time when they come out with their own model, but they might be a little bit behind OpenAI and Microsoft or Google. But in my opinion, models like GPT-4 are already good enough. If you look at the graph I have on the screen right now, it shows you how good GPT-4 is at taking different exams. And I think if people really have a chance to play with GPT-4 and similar models, they'll see how useful they can be in their general life. The main problem right now with these chatbots is not how good they are, it's the integration. As of right now, the access to these models is still restricted. So the only way to use GPT-4 as of right now is to pay for the ChatGPT Plus function And even then, you still only get 25 messages for every 3 hours. For Bing Chat, it is free, but you have to sign up. There is a wait list. And once you get in, there is a cap, I think 150 messages per day. Google Bard is also available to some customers, but there is a wait list. I signed up, I have access now, but it's not as freely available. And all of these are only in the browser. It's not fully integrated. So enthusiasts and early adopters like me will go and seek out these tools and go to the web browser and play around with these tools. But in order to have a truly huge impact, these models have to be integrated into a phone. And this is where Apple comes in. They're usually not the first ones to include new features into their phones, but when they do, it usually works really well. The biggest problem with the GPT models is their size. We don't know how big GPT-4 is because they didn't publish the parameters, but for GPT-3, which is its predecessor, it's 175 billion parameters, which is super impressive, but it also requires 800 gigs of space. And that's really a problem if you want to integrate this model into a phone. Big size of the model causes two issues. First, if the model is really big, it cannot be stored locally on the phone, so it has to talk to the server. That makes it slow and not as responsive as you would like. And the second problem are privacy issues. If your phone is constantly sending your data back and forth to a server, people are worried about what kind of data it's sending about them to a server that don't have full control over. So it'd be a lot better from a privacy standpoint to have all your data that was used to train your specific custom model to be stored on your phone locally as opposed to on a server somewhere on a cloud. And to build a small and capable model should definitely be possible, as was shown by Stanford with their Alpaca model. So what they did was to take the smallest Meta Llama 7 billion parameter model, then they used ChatGPT to generate the training dataset, fed it into the Llama model, and they got their Alpaca 7 billion parameter model. This model is very small and it is still quite capable. And they say Alpaca behaves quantitatively similar to OpenAI's Text DaVinci 003, so that's ChatGPT, while being surprisingly small, so that's the really important part to integrate into a phone, and easy, cheap to reproduce, under $600. They kind of cheated here a little bit because they used the ChatGPT outputs as the training data for the Llama 7 billion parameter open source model, and that is not allowed based on the OpenAI guidelines for ChatGPT. But that's not a problem for Apple because they have a lot of money, so they can generate high quality training data, no problem. So they should be able to follow what Stanford did with the Alpaca model, generate small, compact GPT-like models, and put them into their phones. And here is potentially where Apple has the most leg up, because they use a custom design chips in all their iPhones. So this is the A16 chip and has lots of different cores, and they can customize this for use with the GPT models. So if they decide they need a higher capacity module for something that can house these models in the phones, they can add it in the future architecture and have a significant competitive advantage compared to other phone manufacturers that use off-the-shelf chips.